Picture the edge of the known world, not a cliff, not a sea full of monsters, a line of turf and timber forts strung across the narrow neck of a cold green island, 60-some miles of moor and bog and wind where the Roman Empire simply stops. Now fill it with soldiers recruited from the river mouths of the Rhine, men who worship their own gods, swear in their own language, and have not seen home in 15 years. Add rain that arrives sideways, a bathhouse latrine where the whole garrison shares sponges on sticks, wine shipped 1,000 miles to be drunk in the mud, and, because this is still Rome, even here, especially here, dinner parties, birthday invitations, and central heating under the commander's floor. That's Vindolanda. The last warm rooms before the world runs out. A place where a man could stand freezing on a rampart at dawn and be reading elegant Latin by lamplight that evening. A place where the most powerful empire on earth measured itself out in loaves of bread and pairs of socks. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists pacing the grass-covered ruins with a guidebook. We're living it. 1 year, one person. Everything she would have seen, smelled, heard, and survived. And one thing before we walk in, because this channel keeps its promises. The fort is real. The letters you will hear tonight are real. Dug out of the wet, airless floors of Vindolanda beginning in 1973, ink on slices of wood thinner than a coin, and you can stand in a museum in London today and read them through the glass. But the girl whose hands I'm lending you is not in the letters. She is stitched together from everything around them. The bake ovens archaeologists actually found, the tavern that actually stood outside the walls, the shoes of real women and real children pulled out of the real drains. The rooms are real, the dates are real, the words in ink are real, and every time you hear one I will tell you so. The eyes are borrowed. I will always tell you which is which. So, I make these history stories and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who enjoy drifting off to communal latrine sponges and 2,000-year-old complaints about the beer supply. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your hands are already in the ashes when the trumpet sounds. Elbow deep, both of them, working the long iron rake through the belly of the oven, and the trumpet comes over the fort wall thin and brassy in the dark. The first watch call. The sound that slices every day of your life into its pieces, and your body answers it before your mind does. Shoulders down, rake faster. The ash is still warm from yesterday, soft as grey flour, and it rises around your wrists and settles on your lips and finds the crack in your bottom lip that never quite heals. You taste it. You have tasted it every morning for as long as you've had teeth. If the oven is not hot when the bread goes in, the bread is late. If the bread is late, the commander's kitchen sends the boy back down the hill empty-handed and buys from someone else. And if the commander's kitchen buys from someone else twice, your father owes money on a new bread oven that no longer earns it. That is the whole arithmetic of your life, and it is not yet dawn. It is not just the ash you can smell. It is layers, cold tallow from the lamp you have not yet lit, sitting greasy and patient on its shelf. Yesterday's beer soaked into the tavern floorboards behind you, sweet and sour at once, with the sharp green edge of the bog myrtle the brewer flavours it with. Wet wool drying on the line above the hearth. Always, always wet wool. Smoke, old and new, living in the roof thatch the way memory lives in a skull. And underneath everything, the smell of the vicus itself seeping under the door. Mud, middens, pig, leather, horses, and the sweetish rot of the ditch. underneath even that, you had a bath 4 days ago. By the standards of this street, that makes you nearly a Roman. Welcome to the Vicus of Vindolanda. The civilian settlement crouched outside a garrison fort on the northern frontier of Roman Britain, in the month the Romans call September, in the 4th year of the Emperor Trajan, the year a person counting from her birth in Bethlehem would one day call one, oh, one. Nobody here counts that way. Nobody here has ever heard of Bethlehem. Your name is Senyavara. It is a British name. Your mother chose it. You're 19 years old, and you were born 100 paces from where you are kneeling right now, in the shadow of a fort wall, between two worlds that have never fully decided what to do with each other. Your father is called Longinus. 25 years he served in an auxiliary cohort of Batavians, riverbank men from the delta of the Rhine, recruited by Rome the way Rome recruits everything, thoroughly. He marched into this province when the army first pushed north, and when his 25 years were done, they handed him the thing he keeps in the alderwood box above the tavern door, and he did not go home. Home had stopped being a place on the Rhine somewhere around his 10th winter in Britain. Home was a black-haired Brigantian woman who sold him eggs. That woman is your mother. Her name is Enica, and her people were herding cattle and sheep on these hills when Rome was a rumour moving up from the south, and some of her people are herding them still, out beyond the line, in the country the soldiers watch from the rampart. She married your father the day his discharge made it legal. A soldier cannot marry while he serves. That is the law, and the law is ignored so universally that the army invented paperwork for the wives it pretends don't exist. She moved from a roundhouse to a rectangle. She learned Latin the way you learn a river, enough to cross it, never enough to trust it. And you are what the frontier makes. Half Rhineland, half Brigantia, all Vindolanda. 2 tongues, 1 girl. You dream in both languages, and in the dream nobody notices the seam. Down the ladder behind you, small feet. That will be Catus, your brother, 9 years old, sent down to help and already failing because Catus does not walk anywhere. He charges. He charges at the water jars. He charges at the kindling basket. He charges at the day itself with a wooden sword your father cut him from a barrel stave. And when the cavalry rides out, he stands in the mud with his mouth open like a fish drinking rain. Is it hot yet? He says, in Latin. He always starts in Latin. Kindling, you say, in British. Because your mother's rule is that in this house, the first hour of the day belongs to her language, and even the fire obeys your mother. You rake the last of the ash into the pail, and you lay the fire the way you have laid it maybe 5,000 times. Dried gorse first, snapping and spiteful, then birch, then the split oak your father buys by the cartload. You strike sparks from the iron into the char cloth, and you lean in close, cheek to the cold stone lip of the oven mouth, and you breathe the flame up out of nothing. Your breath, this fire, this day. That is the trade you make every morning before you have said a word to anyone. The flames catch. The light climbs the oven's throat and touches your face with the first warmth of the day, and behind you the fort trumpet sounds again. The change of guard on the walls, and 800 men you have fed, or will feed, or will pour beer for, begin to wake up on the last edge of the world. The bread still has to rise. Empires, weather, gods, governors, none of it matters yet. The bread still has to rise. That is the first rule of your life, and you learned it before you learned either of your languages. And here is what you cannot stop thinking about this particular morning, while your hands shape the fire. 3 days ago, The steward from the commander's house came down the hill himself, not a slave with a basket, and ordered fine wheat loaves for the 11th day of the month, not the usual ration grade bread. The fine flour, the white flour, sieved twice, the flour your mother grinds herself on her own stone, 'cause she trusts no one else's grinding. Loaves for a gathering, loaves for guests. Something is happening up at the Praetorium on the 11th of September. Something with candles and good wine and women's voices. You don't know what yet. You will. By the time the loaves are shaped and proofing under their cloths, there is grey light in the doorway, and your mother is at her quern. You would know that sound asleep. You have known it asleep all your life, the low circular grinding of stone on stone, patient as weather, as your mother kneels with her sleeves pinned back and turns the upper stone by its worn wooden peg. It is a British quern, a beehive of gritstone, and it came from her mother's house, and her mother's mother turned it before that, in a roundhouse on a hill you've never seen. The army has mills. The fort bakehouses grind by the hundredweight. Your mother does not care. For the fine flour, the flour that goes up the hill to the commander's table, she trusts her own stone, her own hands, her own sieve of stretched linen. Soldiers grind grain, she says. I make flour. She says it in British, because it is not a sentence she's willing to say in Latin. That quern is the first thing she would carry out of a fire. Remember it. The second thing, though he would never admit the order, is the box above the door. Alder wood, black with smoke, small enough to hold in 2 hands. Inside it, wrapped in a piece of scarlet cloth that was once part of a cloak, are 2 hinged plates of bronze, each the size of your palm, stitched through with wire, stamped and witnessed and sealed. Your father's diploma, his discharge, 25 years, honourable service, and in return, citizenship for him, legal marriage to your mother, and the right of no man born to lay hands on him or his without answering to the law of Rome. He cannot read most of it. He knows every word of it. On winter nights he has taken it down maybe a dozen times in your whole life, unwrapped it, let the firelight move on the bronze, and wrapped it up again without a word. A wall is only as strong as the men fed behind it, he likes to say, when soldiers grumble about the north. But about the box he says only one thing, and he has said it your whole life. That is the roof over the roof. You never understood it as a child. This year, you will. The tavern itself, because the bakehouse is only the back room of it, is one long rectangle of timber and wattle fronting the road, 8 paces by 4, with a hearth in the middle of the floor, 2 trestle tables your father made, benches polished to a shine by 15 years of soldiers' backsides, and a counter with 3 big jars set into it for beer. Above the counter, on a shelf too high for Certus, sit the good cups, actual Samian ware, glossy red, shipped from Gaul, only 2 of them chipped, and 1 amphora that is never touched. It leans in the corner like a guest who fell asleep, shoulder-stamped, sealed with pitch. Real wine. Not the vinegar the soldiers cut with water, not the sour local trade. Proper Gallic wine, bought by your father in a fit of madness the year the oven was built. Your mother wanted it sold. Your father refused. For the day that is worth it, he said. The day has never yet been worth it. The amphora waits, and gathers a soft grey coat of dust, and waits. 3rd rule of the house, after your mother's language hour and your father's box. Nobody touches the wine. You go for water while the light is still soft. 2 leather-lashed pails on a yoke, down the lane between the strip houses, past shuttered fronts you know by smell before you see them. The leather workers' pits, sour enough to make your eyes water. The smithy, all cold iron and yesterday's charcoal. The brewer's long shed, breathing malt and sweetness into the morning like a sleeping animal. The vicus is one street, really, spilling down the slope outside the fort's west gate. Timber buildings shoulder to shoulder, gable end to the road the way traders build when every foot of frontage costs rent. Behind the houses, vegetable plots, pig pens, middens, drying racks, a shrine to gods with British faces and Latin names. And when I say the fort is the reason for all of it, I need you to understand what that means. This street does not have another purpose. No soldiers, no street. Every loaf, every nail, every pot of beer, every kiss bought or freely given, every child, including you, exists because Rome decided to park several hundred paid men on this particular cold hillside and pay them in actual silver. The vicus is what silver does when you spill it outside a fort wall. It grows a town. At the water tank by the head of the street, fed by a channel the army cut from the burn, because the army is generous with anything that prevents disease within smelling distance of itself, you wait behind two other women, and this is where the day's news lives. Rumour at Vindolanda moves the way information moves through any garrison town, from the fort kitchens to the fort servants, to the water queue, to everyone. Guests on the 11th, says the first woman, not even pretending it needs a greeting first. Riders came in yesterday from Brigger with letters. The lady's invited somewhere, or someone is invited here, nobody can say which way round. Fine loaves ordered, you say, because your family's contribution to the rumour economy is known, expected and priced in. Both women look at you with the deep satisfaction of confirmed intelligence. On this street, that look is currency. Home, pails down. The loaves have risen under their cloths into pale drums, and now comes the part of the morning that is entirely yours, the part you would not trade for citizenship. The peel slides under the first loaf. The oven mouth breathes its dragon breath against your forearms, and you set the bread on the swept hot stone with a wrist flick your mother taught you, and her mother taught her, though hers went onto a bake stone by an open hearth, in a house with no corners at all. Your mother stands beside you a moment, watching the loaves go in. She smells of stone dust and rosemary. On the shelf behind her sits her basket of wool, and the bone needle she works evenings. She is making socks, thick, dense wool socks, worked in the looping way her people make them, from fleece her brother brings off the hills. The soldiers have a Latin word for them, udons, and they pay for them, because the army issues boots and expects the Rhine and the Danube and Britain to feel the same inside them, and they do not. Every autumn her basket fills, every winter it empties. This year she is making a pair long in the leg, and she has not said who they are for, and you have not asked, because you have seen her measure the length against her memory of someone's height, and you are fairly sure you know whose. Your clothes, while we're being honest about everything, a wool tunic to the ankle, undyed, the colour of oatmeal, patched at the left elbow where the oven caught you 2 winters ago. Over it a shorter tunic, and over that, when you go out, a checked cloak in madder red and dark blue, your mother's weave, your mother's pattern, the pattern of her people. Belt of leather with a bronze buckle your father polished for your last birthday until it could pass for gold in bad light. Shoes, and here is the one place this street outdoes half the empire. Good shoes, proper layered sole leather shoes made by the vicus cobbler, because the one thing a garrison town never lacks is leather and men who know what to do with it. Archaeologists 19 centuries from tonight will pull thousands of shoes out of Vindolanda's wet ground, men's, women's, children's, babies, and that is not a guess, that is inventory. This place will be remembered by its feet, your hair, braided, pinned with a bone pin, and the pin matters, because the pin says tradesman's daughter, not servant, not slave. Appearances are read here as carefully as any letter. A centurion can price your whole family with one glance at your shoes and your pin, and centurions do exactly that every day without knowing they are doing it. By full light the tavern is open, and the first customer through the door is the same first customer as always. Atrectus the brewer, from 3 doors down, a barrel-chested man with forearms like rolled brisket, and a permanent expression of a man doing sums that do not come out. He brews the beer your father sells. Your father sells the bread Atrectus eats. The two of them have been locked for 15 years in a rivalry so old and so comfortable, it is indistinguishable from friendship. Your fire's lazy, he says by way of good morning. He says it every morning. Your beer's watered, your father says from behind the counter. He says that every morning too. Neither statement has been true in a decade. And I want you to hold on to Atrectus, because the brewer of Vindolanda is not a man I invented for atmosphere. Among the letters dug from beneath this fort is a real account naming a real man. Atrectus the brewer, Servicerius, beer man, with real sums against his name. Ink, wood, arithmetic, beer. I've borrowed his trade and his name and his street. His mornings I've had to imagine. That is the bargain we make tonight, and I will keep telling you when I'm making it. The second customer is a soldier, off-duty, cloak-damp, fair-haired, young, 22, maybe 23, with the particular stillness of a big man trying not to take up room. His name is Senecio. He is Batavian, like your father was, from the same waterlogged edge of the world, and maybe that is why he started coming here. Or maybe it is the bread. Or maybe your mother has opinions she expresses entirely through eyebrows. It is not the bread. He buys the heel-end loaf, the crusty one, every time he is off duty, and he pays the full as for it, though your father would round it down, and he says the same thing he always says, in his slow, river country Latin. Warm today. It is never warm. It has literally never once been warm. It is the only joke he owns, and he maintains it the way a soldier maintains kit, daily, carefully and past all sense. Warm today, you agree, and hand him his loaf, and his ears go the colour of Samian ware, and he retreats to the end bench like a man who has completed a dangerous patrol. 800 men over that wall, and this is the one your mother measures socks against. You have said nothing. She has said nothing. The needle says it all. Mid-morning, you carry the bread up the hill. This is your errand and no one else's, and it has been since you were 14. The flat basket on your hip, 12 ration loaves, and 4 fine white ones under a linen cloth, up the worn track from the vicus to the west gate of the fort. The track is churned to a paste of mud and gravel, printed with hobnails, hooves, cartwheels, dog paws, and the bare feet of children, all pointing both ways forever. You walk it in 140 steps. You have counted. Everyone who walks it daily has counted. It is that kind of road. The fort stands on its platform above you like a statement nobody asked for. Ramparts of stacked turf on timber corduroy, faced and towered in wood, grey-brown and streaked with rain, tall as 3 men standing on shoulders. not stone. Not yet. This fort has already been torn down and rebuilt more than once since the army first planted a garrison here around the year 85. Each new cohort levelling, dumping, raising the ground, building again on the buried floors of the men before them. They think they are being practical. What they are actually doing, ceiling layer under wet layer, airless and dark, is manufacturing the best time capsule in Roman Britain. Every demolished floor traps its rubbish. The straw, the shoes, the bones, the bracken, and the little slivers of written wood that will make this muddy hillside more famous one day than cities. Nobody up there knows that. You do not know that. Rome is keeping a diary by accident. At the gate, you wait. You always wait. That is what the gate is for as far as the vicus is concerned. A machine for making civilians wait. The sentry knows you, has known you for years, knows the basket, knows the smell of the bread, and none of it matters until the optio on duty flicks 2 fingers, at which point you exist. This morning it is a new optio, older, with a face like a fist, and he lifts the linen off your loaves with 1 finger as if he expects to find daggers underneath, and finds bread, and is disappointed, and waves you through without once looking at your face. You are invisible here, and the invisibility is the point. The vicus feeds the fort the way a root feeds a tree. Nobody thanks a root. Inside, the fort opens the way it always does, all at once. 2 straight streets crossing at the heart of it, timber barracks in ranks, and noise from every direction that has a purpose. That is the strangest thing about the fort if you grew up outside it. In the vicus, noise wanders. In here, every sound is going somewhere. Hammering from the workshops in rhythm, boots on gravel in rhythm, a tent party of recruits being marched wet and miserable around the drill ground, while a duplicarius insults their ancestors with real creativity, in rhythm. You pass the granaries, and the granaries deserve a moment, because the granaries are the actual truth of this place. 2 long timber halls, buttressed like they expect a siege from the weather itself, floors raised on rows of posts a good 1.5 feet off the ground so that air moves under the boards, and the damp of Britain cannot reach the grain. Under those floors, cats, and the memory of 10,000 mice making the worst decision of their lives. Inside, wheat and barley by the hundreds of modi, a modius being the army's beloved measure, a bucket of about 15 pounds of grain stacked, tallied, turned, tallied again. 60 men can shout in the headquarters about honour and Rome, and none of it means anything except as arithmetic performed on these 2 buildings. Bread is the empire, everything else is decoration. Your delivery goes to the praetorium, the commander's house, a whole courtyard residence folded into the fort's best corner, and stepping into its kitchen passage is stepping through a seam in the world. Outside, mud, rain, turf. Inside, plastered walls, painted plaster in places, braziers, rooms with hypocaust heating, actual warm air moving under an actual floor so that a woman from Italy or Gaul can set her bare foot down in a British winter and feel Rome under it. The first time you felt that floor warmth through your shoe soles, at 14, you did not have a word for it in either of your languages. It felt like standing on a sleeping animal. It still does. The commander here, and now we are back on the solid ground of ink, because these are real people, written in real letters, is Flavius Cerealis, prefect of the 9th cohort of Batavians, your father's people, a chieftain's son polished into a Roman officer. His wife is Sulpicia Lepidina. Do not lose that name tonight. Of all the names that have ever passed through this fort, soldiers, governors, emperors on parade, Hers is the one attached to the treasure. The kitchen passage smells of wood smoke, stock, and scorched fat, and standing in the middle of it, directing 3 people at once, is Privatus, slave of the household, and that name too sits in the real accounts of this real house, keeping the real lists. The letters preserve his lists, and I have imagined his voice, a neat, quick, grey-templed man with the air of someone permanently balancing trays no one else can see. He runs the stores, the pantry, the sums. In any practical sense, he runs the praetorium the way such men run every great house in the empire, owned by it and steering it at the same time. Senovara, set them there, mind the... He does not finish. You have already minded it. You have been minding it for 5 years. He lifts the cloth, counts without appearing to count, nods. The fine loaves for the 11th, he says. Same again, doubled. And your mother's honey cakes, if she will. We shall want them early. What happens on the 11th, you ask, because the water queue will interrogate you either way, and it is better to be interrogated with goods in hand. Privatus gives you a look that is 9 parts discretion, and 1 part bursting to tell someone. The Lady Severa, he says, is having a birthday. And there it is. The small, ordinary, world-famous thing. I need to step out of Senovara for a moment and tell you plainly what we are brushing against, because this is the reason I chose this fort in this year. Claudia Severa was the wife of Aelius Brocchus, an officer commanding at another fort in these hills, a place the letters call Briga. Around the year 100, she took a thin leaf of wood, and a scribe wrote for her an invitation to her friend at Vindolanda, and then she picked up the pen herself and added a closing in her own hand. The invitation survived. It was dug out of this waterlogged ground within living memory, catalogued, translated, and set under museum glass, and it reads, really reads, ink to ink. On the 3rd day before the Ides of September, sister, for the day of the celebration of my birthday, I give you a warm invitation to make sure that you come to us, to make the day more enjoyable for me by your arrival. Give my greetings to your cerealis. My Aelius and my little son send their greetings, and then, in a second hand, quicker, rounder, her own. I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to prosper and hail. The 3rd day before the Ides of September is the 11th, the oldest surviving Latin written by a woman's hand anywhere on earth, is a birthday invitation between 2 friends on the edge of the world, and it ends, my dearest soul. Whether it was carried in the year 100 or a year or 2 after, scholars argue in footnotes. That it was carried between these hills, between these houses, by some rider on the road you can see from your tavern door, that is ink. Tonight we set our year so that you, with your basket, are standing in the kitchen passage when the household learns of it. That placement is mine. The letter is theirs. A birthday, you repeat to Privatus. At Briga, the Lady Lepidina will travel. He's already 3 tasks ahead, muttering the pantry aloud in the way he does, a man whose memory lives in his mouth. Chickens, apples, if there are decent ones anywhere in this province, eggs, 100, if they can be had at a fair price. And you should know that shopping list is not my invention either. The household accounts of this house survive, and they read exactly like that. Bruised beans and chickens and 20 apples, if nice ones are available. The groceries of Rome, 1,200 miles from Rome. On the passage table under a weight lies a stack of thin wooden leaves, each the size of a woman's 2 hands, scored down the middle so they fold ink to ink. Letters, drafts, Lists. The whole house breathes them the way it breathes wood smoke. The whole fort does. Reports go out every day. Renuntium, the morning ritual, all present and correct who ought to be. Requests come in. Somebody, somewhere up the road, is always asking for nails or hides or leave or beer. Once, 3 years ago, in this passage, Privatus caught you turning your head sideways at a discarded leaf, trying to make the letters mean something, and instead of sending you off, he took a burnt stick and wrote on the flagstone and said, "That one is a house with no floor." No one told him to do that. No one has told him to keep doing it. Most weeks since, a letter or two at a time on flagstones and fogged windows, and the backs of shaved-down tablets too spoiled to reuse. You can read now, slowly, moving your lips like a cart going uphill. But you can read, and you own one treasure because of it. A used tablet leaf, shaved almost clean. Ghost letters still visible in the grain, which Privatus gave you to practice on. It lives at home, wrapped in cloth, under your sleeping place. You practice with a bit of charcoal and rub it out with tallow, and practice again. Hold on to that little board. It is going to matter more than the diploma before we are done, though not in any way you would guess tonight. On your way back through the fort, arms empty, basket light, you hear it. 2 clerks are crossing from the headquarters building, heads together over a leaf of correspondence, and one of them is reading a phrase aloud in the amused, lifted voice men use for other men's writing, and the phrase is Britanculi, little Britons, the wretched little Britons. It is a real word. It survives. One letter, dug from this ground. Some officer's memorandum coolly noting how the natives fight. Too many cavalry they do not have. Javelins they throw without mounting, the little Britons. One word in one letter, and it tells you exactly what the fort thinks when it looks down the hill. The clerks are not talking about you. They walk past you without seeing you at all, which is its own answer. You are carrying an empty bread basket. You're the reason their breakfast existed. You are half Batavian, daughter of 25 years' service, and you're also your mother's daughter, and your mother's people are the ones in the letter. Britanculi. You do not decide to remember it. It simply stays, the way a splinter stays. You walk out through the gate, past the sentry who does not nod, down the 140 steps of the track, and by the time you reach the tavern door you have arranged your face. Your father is chalking tallies, your mother is at her loom. Catus is stabbing the rain barrel with his barrel-stave sword 26 times, counting each one in Latin. 2 tongues, 1 girl. You are both and you are neither, and the bread still has to rise tomorrow, same as every day. You pick up the next thing that needs doing, and you do it. The 11th of September comes in cold and bright, one of perhaps 9 genuinely beautiful days this country issues per year, as if the weather itself had received the invitation. You're up before the trumpet, and so is your mother, and the bakehouse works like a ship's crew. Her at the quern in the dark, the rasp of stone keeping time, you at the oven. Catus, appallingly awake, fetching wood and asking questions at a rate no household could answer. The fine loaves go in pale and come out the colour of a lion. The honey cakes, your mother's, barley and honey and butter, a recipe with no Latin in it whatsoever, come off the bakestone smelling like the entire concept of childhood. Privatus wants everything early, and everything is early, and you carry it up the 140 steps while the frost is still in the shadows of the ruts. The praetorium this morning is a struck beehive. You have never seen it like this. Slaves crossing the courtyard at the pace that is technically not running. the smell of hot oil and crushed herbs rolling out of the kitchen like weather, Privity in the passage with his lists, murmuring his pantry to himself, and for once he counts your loaves visibly, touching each one, because today is not a day for trusting anyone's arithmetic, including his own. Good, he says. Good. Good. 3 goods. In 5 years you've never heard 3. Through the inner doorway for 6 seconds you see the lady herself, Sulpicia Lepidina, wife of the prefect, crossing the courtyard in travelling clothes, a hooded cloak of fine wool, deep madder red, worth more than your family's oven, with her maid behind her carrying a wrapped bundle that is exactly the size and reverence of a gift. Pale, quick, younger than the word lady suggests, a woman who runs a house of this size at the end of the world and is, this morning, unmistakably lit from inside. She is going to see her friend. That is all. 6 seconds, a doorway, a red cloak. You will never speak to her. The gulf between the tavern and the praetorium is wider than the gulf between the vicus and the moon. But hold those 6 seconds, because in the deep winter that is coming, you're going to see that same doorway in a very different light. And in the descent at the end of our year, that friendship, hers and Severa's, ink and all, is going to carry us down to sleep. The escort forms up on the Via Principalis, while you are still in the kitchen passage. 8 troopers, breath of the horses smoking in the cold, harness jingling that particular bright cavalry jingle that Catus would trade his soul for. And second from the rear, sitting his horse with the careful stillness of a big man on parade, is Senecio. He does not see you. You are a girl with a basket in a doorway. He's a soldier on escort. The fort has assigned you your sizes this morning and neither of you argues. But you watch the party clatter out under the gate, the lady, the maid, the gift, the 8 riders, and turn west on the road toward Briga, into the low bright sun, and you think, somewhere out there, at the end of that road, a woman is waiting for her friend on her birthday, and she wrote, "Come and her friend is coming. I shall expect you, sister." You do not know those words yet. The road knows them. The road carried them. The vicus spends the day the way small towns spend all such days, pretending not to watch, watching. By afternoon the water queue has established the menu at Briga to 2 decimal places, invented a second gift, and married off 2 of the escort troopers. Your mother listens to a full recitation of it from a neighbour, says nothing, and later at the loom remarks in British, to no one. Her people and my people used to feast each other too. We wrote nothing down, that is the only difference. Then she is quiet for a long time, and the shuttle goes back and forth, and you do not ask which difference she means, because her face is closed like a door in wind. The tavern that evening is full, because the tavern is always full when something has happened. Even a small something, even someone else's birthday, and this is where I have to explain the economics of your family one time, so you understand what everything costs for the rest of our year. Come stand behind the counter. The counter is where the frontier actually happens, 1 coin at a time. A ration loaf sells for an aes, the small bronze coin, the workhorse. The heel-end crusty loaf, also an as, though it is better, because bread prices are a treaty, not a market. A pot of Atrectus's beer, 2 asses, a bowl of your mother's stew, barley, mutton, whatever the hills sent, 3, a fine white loaf, when anyone below the praetorium buys 1, 4, 16 asses make a denarius, the silver coin, the real coin, the coin pay comes in. An auxiliary infantryman sees something like 250 denarii a year on the books. Sees, I say, because the army deducts food, boots, bedding, the burial club. Yeah, and by the time the dust settles, a soldier holds maybe a third of it in actual silver, which is still, and this is the entire secret of the vicus, actual silver in the hands of several hundred young men on a hillside where there is exactly one street to spend it on. Your father's ledger is chalk on a board and knots in his memory, but you have watched him do the sums, evenings, lips moving, and you know the shape of them. A good night. The tavern clears 40, 50 asses over costs. 3 denarii, near enough. Out of that, grain to buy when your own contract flour runs short, wood by the cartload, tallow, salt, Atrectus's barrels, rent to the man who owns the plot, because you own the building and not the ground, welcome to the frontier, and, above everything, riding on the whole year like weather, the oven debt. 200 denarii your father borrowed from a lender in Coria to rebuild the oven bigger, this spring before this story. He owes the last 110, and the agreed day is the 1st of May. Miss the day and the interest steps up like a man changing gear on a hill. This is why the Praetorium contract matters. This is why the 11th of September matters. Fine loaves at Praetorium prices are the difference between paying on the 1st of May and explaining on the 1st of May. Explaining, your father says, is what poor men call begging. He says it cheerfully. He chalks the board. You have seen him rub his knee when he thinks the counter hides him. The knee that ended his 25 years, swollen every damp week of the year, which on this hillside means every week. The army gave him bronze in a box for it. It did not give him a new knee. Midway through the evening, Atrectus plants himself at the counter with the expression of a man bearing news too good to give away quickly. They are short of beer, he says, up the road. He tips his head westward, meaning the outpost detachments, the road forts, the working parties strung along the Staingate. Officer of cavalry sent to the prefect himself, in writing. He lets the silence do its work, then delivers, rolling every word like a barrel down a ramp. My fellow soldiers have no beer. Please order some to be sent. The bench laughs. Your father laughs. Atrectus does not laugh. Atrectus looks like a priest whose God has finally, publicly answered. And here is the thing that letter is real. It survives. A decurion named Masclus, cavalry officer, writing to Prefect Cerialis about supplies, and at the end in genuine documented ink. My fellow soldiers have no beer. Please order some to be sent. It is one of the most famous sentences ever dug out of British mud, and it deserves to be, because there is no better 6-word portrait of an army anywhere in literature. Whether it was written in our exact week, I cannot promise you. That it was written by that man to this fort's commander is ink. Tonight it reaches the vicus the way everything reaches the vicus, worn smooth by retelling, and it makes the brewer Vindolanda the happiest man in Britain. No beer, Atrectus repeats, into his own cup with bottomless satisfaction. An army, sitting in the rain at the end of the world, and what breaks them? No beer. Write that on my stone when I go. Your father raises his cup a solemn inch. To the thirst of Rome, he says, long may she owe us. And the whole room drinks to the best toast either language has produced all year. Late, when the benches have emptied and the fire is down to breathing coals, the escort comes back. You hear them before you see them. Cavalry on the dark road, the ring of it. And through the doorway you watch the torches pass up the track to the gate. The lady home from her friend's table, hood up against the night. A minute later, boots. Senecio dismounted. off duty the moment the gate took his horse, ducking under your lintel with the night cold still on his cloak and his face still full of the day. He has ridden to Briga and back. He has stood post outside a birthday dinner at the edge of the world. He accepts the last heel of bread and a pot of beer, and he sits at the end bench, and for once in his life he offers information unprompted, in his slow river Latin, as if reporting to the room. There was singing, the fire settles. Your mother's needle stops. Good singing, you ask? He considers this with the full seriousness he brings to all questions. Loud, he says at last. And then, quietly, as if it were classified, the lamps were lit all down the hall. You could see them from the road coming home, like a ship. Like a ship, 8 words and a simile, for Senecio, an epic poem. He looks alarmed at himself and puts bread in his mouth to stop anything further escaping. You bank the fire that night thinking of it. Lamplight from a doorway. Laughter you were not inside of. A house like a ship riding the dark hills. Somewhere west a woman fell asleep tonight happy, because her friend crossed the moor to sit beside her, because a letter said come, and the road said yes. The frontier does not care, you remind yourself. The frontier is wind and grain and orders. But the lamps were lit all down the hall, even here. That is worth knowing about the world, and you fold it away with your practice tablet under the sleeping place, where you keep the things that are yours. September ripens into October, and October at Vindolanda means 3 things: the harvest carts, the bathhouse, and your uncle. The bathhouse first, because you go on the 8th day of the month, and because nothing separates the 2 halves of your blood like a Roman bath. It stands outside the fort wall, downslope, a stone and timber block with its own wood pile the size of a house, because a bathhouse eats trees the way the fort eats bread. The army built it for the army, but the army long ago accepted what every garrison accepts, that the whole hillside will use it, in its turn, at its hours. There are soldiers' hours and everyone else hours, and the everyone else hours are when the vicus goes, the women, the children, the traders, the veterans. And that is not me being generous to my own story. When the archaeologists came, 19 centuries later, the drains of Vindolanda's bathhouse gave up women's shoes, children's shoes, hairpins, beads. The everyone else hours are in the ground. The vicus washed here. You washed here. So, you pay your quadrans worth at the door. You leave your clothes on the shelf under the eye of the attendant, a veteran with one ear who guards tunics like the standards of a legion. And you walk barefoot into the warm room, and the hypocaust breathes up through the floor into the soles of your feet, and every single time, without fail, your body does a small, treacherous thing. It relaxes as if it were home. Stone that is warm like skin. Air that is thick and soft and smells of wood smoke. Wet stone, olive oil, and people. You sit in the heat until your thoughts slow to honey. You scrape your arms and legs with a borrowed strigil, the bronze blade dragging oil and grey rolls of old skin off you in strips, which sounds disgusting and is also, and I am sorry about this, one of the great physical pleasures ever engineered by mankind. You dip in the plunge and shriek like everyone shrieks. You come out an hour later, scrubbed pink, smelling faintly of oil and smoke, lighter by a layer. And yes, since this channel does not look away, along one wall of the bathhouse block is the latrine, bench seats over running water, No partitions, conversation encouraged, and beside the channel stand the pots with the sponge sticks, communal, rinsed between uses in water that is doing its best. The Romans conquered the world and then sat down together on it. 2,000 years of plumbing progress separate you from them, and honestly, on the sponge question, be grateful for every year. Your mother has been to the bathhouse exactly 4 times in her life, each time under protest for a wedding or a churching, and each time she sat in the warm room straight-backed like a hostage. It is not the nakedness. Her people are not fussy. It is the floor. A fire should be in front of you, she says, where you can see what it wants. A fire under the floor, invisible, tame, serving. That to her is the whole of Rome in one arrangement, comfort with something hidden underneath. She heats water at her own hearth and washes at her own basin. And if you want to understand the frontier, you can stop reading letters and just look at one household where the daughter goes to the baths and the mother never will. Your uncle arrives on the full moon, the way he always does, with the cattle. Dubnus, your mother's brother. He comes down from the high country twice a year, spring and autumn, driving beast for the fort's contracts. The army eats British cattle, wears British leather, sleeps under British wool, and pays silver for all of it while calling the people who raise it Britunculi. And if you want that contradiction resolved, you will have to take it up with Rome, because the frontier never resolved it, only lived it. He is a big man gone lean, grey in his moustache, dressed in check and sheepskin, and he smells of the hills, bracken, rain, smoke, sheep, a smell that goes through you like a cord, because it is the smell of your mother's stories. He stops in the tavern doorway, surveys the benches, the counter, the Samian on its shelf. Your father. Still here, he says in British. It is what he always says. It means still Roman. Still counting your legs on your fingers, your father replies, in Latin. It is what he always replies. It means approximately nothing. It is the sound 2 old rams make instead of butting. Then Dubnus sits and eats 3 bowls of his sister's stew without one word, which in his language is a sonnet in her honour. The cattle deal is done the next morning at the fort gate, and you are there because Dubnus sells and your father brokers and the army buys, and somewhere in that triangle you have become the hinge, the girl with both languages. The requisition clerk wants 12 beasts at 19 denarii a head. Dubnus wants 24 denarii and announces this figure by staring at the clerk in silence while you translate the silence. You settle at 21.5, plus the hides of any that fail inspection return free, which is the clause Dubnus actually came for, because a hide is a winter's boots, and he knows the inspection will fail at least one on purpose. Everyone leaves moderately dissatisfied, which is the sound a fair price makes. 21.5 denarii, 12 beasts, 258 denarii, counted into a saddlebag in silver the same afternoon. Your uncle, the wretched little Briton, rides back into the hills carrying more coined money than the tavern will clear between now and midwinter. The letters in the fort will record men like him only sideways, a name in an account, a debt, a delivery. The hills are full of shrewd men Rome pays and disdains in the same breath, and the money spends anyway. Silver has no accent. Market day, mid-October, the last big one before the road sour, and the street doubles itself with strangers. Dealers up from Coria, a wine man, a bronze goods man, and, planted mid-street like a shrine to money itself, a Gaulish trader with crates of Samian ware, the glossy red tableware of the entire Roman world, packed in straw like eggs. Your mother has wanted for 3 years, a proper mortarium, the gritted mixing bowl every Roman kitchen swears by. Hers is cracked and mended with a rivet and mocks her daily. You have been sent to do the buying, because your father says with simple pride, "You haggle like your uncle stares." The Gaul opens at 4 denarii, invoking the kilns of his homeland, the perils of the sea, and the state of the roads in that order. You have grown up behind a counter, you recognize the liturgy, you let it finish. Then you point out gently in market Latin that his straw is full of autumn, meaning last boat of the season. Whatever he does not sell here, he carts over bad roads to smaller markets, at his own risk for 2 more months. You offer 2 denarii. He clutches his chest and comes down to 3.5 and calls you his ruin. You examine the bowl's stamp, the potter's name pressed in the clay. Every Samian workshop signs its work. The empire is drowning in signatures. Find a hairline star by the spout and set it back down as if grieving. 3 even, he says quickly. 2.5, you say, and 1 is over. And Catus, who's been vibrating at your elbow this whole time, gets the pick of the seconds crate for the as. The Gaul looks at Catus. Catus looks at the crate the way dogs look at butchers. "Done," says the Gaul, in the tone of a man recording a crime, and everyone has performed their part, and the price lands within a whisker of what both of you knew it would be when he said 4. Cost of the bowl to him, boat and cart and breakage figured in. Maybe a denarius and a half. His margin, an honest isnsum over a fair one. Your mother's rivet-mocked bowl, retired with full honours to the shelf because her people do not throw away a thing that served. The new mortarium takes up duty that same evening grinding rosemary, and your mother, who distrusts Rome on principle from floor fires to fine letters, handles this one Roman object with frank respect, because it is heavy, and it is honest, and it works. That is her entire foreign policy. Does it work, and what is hidden under it? The bowl passes, the bathhouse never will. And Catus's pick from the seconds crate. A small Samian cup with a wobbled rim, seconds grade one as. He drinks watered beer from it at supper that night with the gravity of a consul, both hands, elbows planted, and announces that when he is a cavalryman he will drink from it in camp. He is 9. 19 centuries from now, the ground of this hillside will be full of exactly such cups, wobbles and all, and museum labels will say drinking vessel, Samian, imported, and not one of them will say a boy loved this the way boys love things, entirely, for no reason, forever. But that is what the ground is actually holding. Now you know. October ends with the first hard frost, and the morning after it at the water tank you hear that the sick list up the hill has begun its winter climb. Coughs, fevers, and eyes. Always eyes. On this frontier, when the season turns, the smoke of braziers in shut barracks, the wind off the moor, the grey glare of low cloud. Inflammation of the eyes, the reports call it. The fort has an infirmary, and the infirmary keeps lists, and the lists go into the daily strength report, and you would not believe me if I invented what those reports look like, so in a moment I will show you a real one. But that is November's business. Tonight, the last night of October, your mother finishes the socks. She casts off the final loop, bites the yarn, and lays the pair over her knee, long in the leg, dense as felt. The grey of the hills with one band of madder red at the top are her pattern, her people's red. She looks at them a while. Then she rolls them, ties them with a scrap of the same red, and sets them on the shelf beside the good cups where things wait that have somewhere to go. For the cold, she says in British to the fire, to no one. The fire settles. Winter is in the roof thatch, in the door crack, in the long dark coming. Somewhere over the wall the trumpet sounds the change of watch, and 800 men pull their cloaks tighter, and the year begins at last to lean downhill. November on the frontier is not a month. It is a subtraction. The light goes first. By the middle of the month the sun clears the ridge in the middle of the morning and is gone before the ovens cool, and the vicus lives by lamp and fire in a brown half-day that never fully commits to being day at all. The road goes next. Rain, then frost, then rain on frost until the Staingate, the Army's spine road, running east to Coria and the bridge, west toward Luguvalium and the sea, turns into a long brown wound that carters read like sailors read water. Then the colour goes. All of it, from the whole world, and what is left is what the frontier is underneath. Grey grass, black bog, white sky, and the fort. And when I say the fort feels different in winter, I need you to understand what that means from inside a garrison. Summer is patrols, convoys, exercises, road gangs, hunting. The cohort flung out across the country like a hand spread open. Winter is the hand closing. The detachments pull in. The gates shut earlier. 800 men, minus the absent, live stacked in timber barrack rooms, 10 by 12 feet, 8 men to a room with their kit and their smoke and their tempers, for a season that lasts on this hillside roughly half the year. The army knows exactly what that does to men. That is why winter has more inspections, more fatigues, more drill, more paperwork than any campaign season. An army in barracks must be kept moving, the way you keep stirring a pot that wants to burn. Paperwork. Let me show you the one I promised. There survives, from this exact fort, a real morning strength report, written a few years before our night, when the garrison was the first cohort of Tungrians, before your father's Batavians took over the hillside. And I want you to hear actual numbers, actual ink, because no invented scene will ever tell you what frontier soldiering was like better than this arithmetic does. Total strength, 752 men. Of those, absent, detached to other posts, offered headquarters, gone to Gaul, strung out on duties down the roads, 456. Present, 296. And of those 296 present, unfit for service, 31, 15 sick, 6 wounded, 10, and the clerk wrote it out in its own line, its own category, standing evidence of what this country does to men, 10 suffering from inflammation of the eyes. That is the empire at the edge, in one wooden leaf. More than half the cohort somewhere else. 1/10 of the remainder broken down. And eyes. Always the eyes. Peat smoke in shut rooms, wind off the moor, the white glare of low cloud on wet ground, day after day, until the lids swell and weep and a soldier who can fight anything cannot look at the sky. I show you this because in the 3rd week of November, Senecio stops coming for bread. You notice on the 2nd missed off-duty day, and say nothing. On the 4th, you ask, carefully, sideways, at the gate, of a trooper you know by face, and the trooper says with the flat unconcern soldiers armour themselves in, "Eyes, he's on the list, half his section's on the list." The list. Here's a line on a leaf now, in a clerk's neat hand, in the same column as those documented 10 from years past. Lipient, the ones with weeping eyes. Nothing dramatic. Nobody dies of it, usually. He will sit in the infirmary twilight with a salve of some army recipe on his lids. The medics have their own stores, their own accounts. The letters record medicus and hospital at forts like this, and he will be forbidden the wall watch, and for a man like Senecio, who owns one joke in his duty, the forbidding will be the worst of it. Your mother hears you tell your father. She says nothing at the loom, but the next morning the rolled grey socks with the madder red band are gone from the shelf beside the good cups, and the honey crock is lighter, and when you carry the bread up the 140 steps there is, tucked under the linen, a second smaller cloth, socks, a comb of honey, and a twist of dried bog myrtle, which her people steep for sore eyes, and which she would sooner boil than explain to a Roman medic. For the Batavian with the eyes, she says, in Latin. She says it in Latin, which is how you know it is official. Privatus receives the bundle at the Praetorium kitchen with one raised eyebrow and total comprehension. Nothing crosses that passage without him pricing it, and he prices this instantly and exactly. Not bread, not business. The infirmary orderly owes me, is all he says. It'll reach him. In a fort everything travels by owed favours. It is the one currency that never debases. And because the fort is the fort, you hear the sequel within the week by the usual route, kitchen to servants to water queue. And the sequel is this. The bundle reached the infirmary, and Senecio, informed it was from the tavern, sat holding the socks for a while in the brown twilight. And then he asked the orderly, slowly, seriously, the way he asks everything, whether the red band at the top was a Batavian pattern or a British one, and the orderly said he didn't know, and Senecio said, both, maybe. Both, maybe. You carry that around for days like a coin you keep checking your pouch for. It is also the month the underpants letter goes around the benches, and I refuse to let you sleep without it. A letter came for one of the soldiers, read aloud in the tavern by a literate mate, as soldiers' letters are, because a letter from home is a public feast. And the letter, sent to a man on this cold hillside from someone who loved him somewhere warmer, itemised its parcel thus. I have sent you pairs of socks and 2 pairs of sandals and 2 pairs of underpants. Socks, sandals, underpants. That letter is real. It survives. Ink on wood, dug from under this fort, Sublegaria. Underpants. 2 pairs, dispatched across the world with love. Scholars have built careers on the great correspondence of Rome. Cicero, Seneca, Pliny. But I will tell you the truth. No line of Cicero has ever made me feel the past breathing on my neck like somebody's mother or wife or sister. Somewhere in the warm south, worrying about a soldier's underwear on the British frontier. The benches roar. The soldier goes scarlet and defends his mother's prudence with his fists half raised, laughing. Your father pounds the counter. Even your mother at the loom makes the small sound she makes instead of laughing. Empires are grain and iron and law, but they are held together, actually held together, at the seams where it counts, by socks and honey and letters and somebody worrying about somebody. Write that on Rome stone when it goes. Dubnus comes back at the dark of the moon, unlooked for, with 2 pack ponies of salted mutton and winter fleeces. One last sail before the high tracks close. The signs are early, is all the explanation he gives, and your mother looks at him sharply, because her brother does not waste journeys. It is on the 2nd morning of that visit that he jerks his chin at you across the yard and says in British, "Walk up with me. I want eyes younger than mine on the weather." You climb the big hill east of the fort, the long whaleback that stands over the whole country, where the army keeps a lookout point, because from the top the land explains itself. It is a hard, cold, lung-scouring climb, frost in the grass. your breath and his going up like offering smoke, and then the ground levels, and the world opens, and every single time it takes your breath, the view. The fort below you, shrunk to a child's toy, a neat brown rectangle stamped on the hillside, its streets a cross, its granaries 2 matchsticks, wisps of smoke standing straight up from 100 fires in the still air. The vicar's dribbling downhill from its gate like a sentence trailing off, the Steingate running east and west, straight where the land allows, stubborn where it doesn't, with one tiny cart on it, crawling, and the burn glinting in its cleft, and then everything else. The moors rolling north in grey gold swells to the horizon. No wall, no line, no mark, just land becoming winter, becoming sky. From up here you can see the whole arrangement in one look. The empire is the rectangle and the road. Everything else to every horizon is the other thing, and the rectangle is so small. Your Romans, Dubnus says at your shoulder, not unkindly, name the rivers. Did you know that? They have a name for every water from here to the southern sea, written in their lists. He turns his head slowly along the skyline north, where the cloud is building in a long dark shelf. The rivers were here first. So were we. The stone under their fort is older than their gods, and the weather. He lifts his chin at the shelf of cloud, has never heard of them at all. Remember that, and you will never be afraid of a rectangle again. He looks at you then, grey-moustached, wind-eyed, your mother in his face the way she is in yours. But feed them, he adds. Feed them well, niece. Empires pay silver for bread, and silver survives empires. A pause. That's called shepherding. You do not have to love the flock, and that, in one November sentence on a hilltop, is the entire philosophy of every native trader on every frontier Rome ever drew. And I could not have said it better with 100 documents, which is why I let him say it. The cloud shelf in the north keeps building all the way down the hill. Dubnus loads his ponies that same afternoon, takes his silver, grips your father's forearm, holds his sister's eyes a moment. Early signs, he says again at the door. Keep the wood dry and the pride cheap. And he has gone up the track into the first thin snow of the year, which begins to fall fine as flour before he's out of sight. That night the wind goes around to the northeast and stays there, and in the morning the water tank wears a lid of ice thick as your thumb. Winter has come to Vindolanda, and this year, this is the thing the whole hillside will remember, this year, winter is not coming to visit. It is coming to stay. December teaches you the true shape of your house. Every draught introduces itself by name. The one under the tavern door that lies along the floor like a dog made of knives. The one down the smoke hole that shoulders the fire sideways when the wind is in the northeast, which is now always. The one through the shutter seam by your sleeping place that you plug nightly with the same twist of fleece, and that nightly works it loose by morning, patient as a tax collector. Cold is not an event here. Cold is a resident. It moves in around the feast of Saturn, and it does not move out until the curlews come back, and you arrange your entire body's life around it, where you stand, how you sleep, which hand you keep in your armpit while the other works. And when I say cold, I need you to understand what cold means in a timber house on a North British hillside in December. This is not the cold of a brisk walk. This is cold as a task. Water is a task. The tank frozen, the burn frozen at its edges, every bucket earned with a maul. Bread is a task with new steps in it. Dough proofing swaddled like an infant beside the hearth. because the bakehouse corners are cold enough to kill yeast. Your hands crack at the knuckles and along the old burn scar, and you grease them with tallow at night and sleep with them clenched between your knees. And in the morning the first hour of oven work is done through a fine mesh of pain that you stopped mentioning to anyone years ago, because whom exactly would you tell, and what exactly would they do? Every woman at the water tank has the same hands. You could shake hands with this whole street blindfolded and name each neighbour by her calluses. Up the hill the fort burns wood like a beast and squats down to endure. The trumpet calls come muffled on snow days, as if the frontier itself had a blanket over its head. The wall watch is shortened, men rotated in and out of the towers before their feet go, and even so the benches at night are full of the winter duty litany, recited with the connoisseurship soldiers reserved for their own misery. Which tower catches the wind worst, whose beard froze to his cloak pin, what the medic said about toes. Your father listens from behind the counter with his old soldier face, which is a face that says, I did 25 of these winters, and you will get no sympathy here, and also, quietly, under everything, I remember. On the worst nights he stands the last man a free half-pot before the walk up the track. He would deny this under oath. He does it every time. His knee, this December, is bad. Worse than you have seen it. The damp got into it in November and the freeze is grinding it, and he has begun, when he thinks the counter hides him, to lean on the shelf post while he pours. Your mother has begun, without one word of negotiation, to shift the barrel lift into the morning, when a trectus happens. Happened every day, what a coincidence. To be in the doorway with his brisket forearms and nothing urgent to brew. The two men insult each other throughout. The barrels get lifted. That is friendship, in the only dialect either of them speaks. The oven debt does not feel the cold. That is the thing about a debt. It is the one resident of the house that winter cannot slow down. 110 denarii owed, due the 1st of May, and December is when the arithmetic starts living behind your father's eyes at supper. The praetorium contract pays steadily. The fine loaves go up the hill, the silver comes down, but the benches are thinner, because when soldiers are cold and confined, their pay bleeds away inside the walls, on dice and debts to each other, before it can walk down the track and become tavern money. Chalk lines shorten. Your father sums them, lips moving, and rubs the board, and sums them again, as if the chalk might have been holding out on him the first time. You do your own sums privately on your practice tablet in charcoal in Latin numerals, because Privatus taught you those too, X and V and the little subtractions, and you rub them out with tallow after. It is somehow easier to be afraid of a number when it is written down. It is also, you're discovering, easier to argue with it. Mid-month, the talk at the gate turns to the convoys, and this is where the winter's real story begins. Quietly, the way real stories do, as freight gossip. Grain. The fort's granaries went into winter decently filled, but decently is a word quartermasters use in autumn. By midwinter they use words like sufficient, and by late winter, if the roads have failed, they stop using words and start using measures. The high country's own harvest was thin. Dubnus said so in November. Early signs, and the army's winter grain rides in by road, from the depots and the threshing floors of the south and east, by ox cart along the Staingate, at the pace of the worst mile of it. And somewhere down that road this winter sits a letter I am going to read to you almost straight, because it survives. Real ink, from this fort's world, one trader or supply man writing to another, and because it is the truest document of a frontier winter that exists anywhere. The writer says, I have bought 5,000 modi of ears of grain, and I need cash. Send me at least 500 denarii, or I shall lose my deposit and be embarrassed. He chases hides promised at Cataractonium. He complains a partner did not even bother to write. And then he sets down the sentence that every carter, every quartermaster, every baker's daughter on this road already knows in her bones, I would have collected them already, except that I did not care to injure the animals while the roads are bad. The roads are bad. 5,000 modii sitting on a threshing floor somewhere south, bought and paid for and useless, because a road is a promise the weather has to co-sign. 75,000 pounds of grain, waiting on the state of the mud. When people tell you empires run on armies, correct them gently. Empires run on axle grease, deposits, and the knees of oxen, and the letters from this hillside prove it in ink. For now, mid-December, it is only talk. The granaries are decently filled. The word decent is still on duty, and then, because Rome is never only one thing, the darkest week of the year arrives, and with it, of all things, a festival. Saturnalia, the feast of Saturn, 17th of December, and the army keeps it wherever the army is. The calendars of the garrisons carry their festivals like ammunition, and a cohort at the world's end keeps the feast with more ferocity, not less, because the feast is a rope back to everywhere else. For a few days the fort goes deliberately, ceremonially upside down, ranks loosened, mess rooms garlanded with whatever green survives on this hillside, holly, ivy, fir, gambling openly tolerated, and the old custom of masters waiting on servants observed in whatever token way each barrack room's dignity can stand. Gifts circulate, candles, nuts, little clay lamps, dice, socks. The letters record such gifts moving between men, and I will let you guess whether your mother's needle had a profitable week. She had wool laid in by the Feast of the Dead, my friends. She saw Saturnalia coming from October. The vicus keeps the feast the way the vicus keeps everything, both ways at once. Latin songs at the benches, British ones later in the evening when the beer is deeper. Your father sets candles in the doorway, lights them from the hearth, and stands a moment looking at the little flames the way he looks at the diploma. Your mother sets out honey cakes, and also, without comment, a small dish by the door for spirits Rome has no paperwork on. Catus is given his gift early because he's been vibrating since dawn. From your father, a real leather belt with a real bronze tip, cavalry style. From Privatus, sent down wrapped in sacking with 3 good words. For the recruit, an old, cracked, genuinely army-issue leather knife sheath, which transforms Catus on the spot into the tallest 9-year-old in the province. He wears both to bed. You check at midnight. Belt and sheath, over his nightshirt, flat on his back like a fallen statue, fists closed, gone. And on the second night of the feast, at the loud hour, the tavern door opens on a swirl of snow fog, and there is Senecio, off the sick list, cleared for duty that morning. His eyes are still rimmed pink, and he narrows them against the lamplight like a man walking into a legend, but he is upright and shaved, and painfully deliberate, and he crosses the whole room to the counter, past every bench, in front of every witness, carrying something in his fist. "For the house," he says, in his slow river Latin, and sets it down. It is a comb. Boxwood, 1 piece, double-sided. The kind soldiers carry, and the kind, I will tell you, this ground will one day yield by the dozen, teeth and all, wet and perfect after 19 centuries. He has bound the spine of it with a thin band of red, a strip of madder red wool that is unmistakably unravelled from the top of one particular grey sock. The room does not laugh. The room is a garrison tavern on Trajan's frontier. It wants to laugh so badly it hurts. But your father only looks at the comb, then at Senecio for a long, weighing quartermaster moment, and then pours a half-pot free and pushes it across, which in this house is a treaty signed. Your mother, at the fire, does not look up from her needle. In British, softly to the wool she says, both, maybe. You keep the comb, not on the household shelf, under the sleeping place, wrapped with the practice tablet, where you keep the things that are yours. Its teeth smell faintly of boxwood and are spaced fine and true, and there is one thin thread of red at its spine, and no museum will ever hold it, because it is not in the ground, because it is not real, because I made it up out of 100 real combs and one real red-banded pattern of sock. But I will tell you this, of everything in this story I invented, it is the thing I am most sure of. Somewhere on this hillside some such gift was given, some such winter, in some such silence. Objects like it are in the cases. The moment is not. The moment is what I am for. The feast ends. The garlands brown and are burned. Needles first in bright hissing handfuls catus supervising. The fort rights itself. Ranks retighten, the trumpet resumes its old iron manners, and the snow that fell soft and ceremonial on Saturnalia does not melt. It settles in. It means it. By the turning of the year, the drifts stand to your thigh in the hollows of the track. The Steingate east is a rumour, the Steingate west is a dare, and the word at the gate, passed down quietly now, kitchen to servants to queue, with no relish at all any more, is that the granary tallies have begun to be taken not monthly but by the week. The word decent has gone off duty. The word sufficient has taken the watch. You stand in the tavern doorway on the year's last night with your mother's cloak around both your shoulders, watching the lamps of the wall towers burn their small stubborn holes in the dark, and you think of 5,000 modii on a threshing floor somewhere south, behind the bad roads, bought, paid for, waiting. Rome is far away, you think. The cold is not. The trumpet sounds, muffled, down the snow. You go in and bank the fire, and you leave one candle burning in the doorway, for the year, for the road, for whatever is listening in either language. The bread still has to rise tomorrow, even now, especially now. January arrives like a verdict. Afterward the vicus will simply call it the hard weeks, the way people name a thing they have no wish to describe, and everyone will know which weeks are meant. 6 of them, give or take, from the middle of January into the last of February, when the northeast wind locked its jaw on the frontier and did not let go, and the temperature by day would not climb, and by night the timbers of the house cracked like whips as the frost got into their hearts, and the world contracted to one question asked hourly in 2 languages. What is left, and how long will it stretch? Understand the machine that is failing, because it fails in a particular order. The fort eats first from its granaries. That is what they are for. A fort is a stomach with walls. But the granaries were filled for a winter of average malice, topped by convoys that average winters permit. The convoys stop. East Road drifted blind, West Road glazed, and no carter alive will kill his oxen for a deadline. You erred the man's own ink on that subject. So the fort draws down its floors, week by tallied week, and as it draws down, it does the thing that garrison stomachs always do. It stops selling. All winter the quartermaster's back door had quietly retailed surplus, bruised grain, sweepings, sacks past their best, down the hill to the vicus, to the bakers and brewers and pig keepers. That door shuts first. No decree, no trumpet. It just does not open one morning, and a dozen households below the wall feel the cold click of it in their stores. A trectus feels it as malt. Your family feels it as everything. Your father does the new arithmetic in chalk in front of you all, because he is not a man who believes fear shrinks when you hide it. Contract flour for the praetorium, protected. That sack is sacred. That sack is the roof. Household grain otherwise, at the hard week's rate of baking and stew, 19 days. Roots and salt mutton thanks to Dubness's November instinct, perhaps a month, thin. Wood, short, but the alder copse by the burn can bleed a little more. Silver, the debt hoard, the full 110 denarii now, sown and hidden and untouchable, because May does not care what February was like. Eat it, and we are safe until spring, he says, tapping the chalk against the sum, and beggared at the 1st of May. Hold it, and we are hungry and whole. He looks around the table, at your mother, at you, at Catus sitting very straight in his cavalry belt. Hungry and whole, he says, and that is the vote, and no one calls for another. And here, quietly, without one heroic gesture, your mother takes command of the winter, and the quern stone becomes the most important object on this hillside below the wall, because grain is not bread, and in the hard weeks the distance between those two words is where people fall. What can be got rough. Barley meant for beasts, oats, spelt sweepings, the odd sack of bear off a hill farm at a price that would make August laugh. Rough grain wants grinding, and the vicus's cheap habit of paying the Fort Mills back door is gone with the shut door. But in the bakehouse behind the tavern there is a gritstone quern that has outlived 3 empires' worth of weather, and a woman who has turned it since childhood, and a daughter she taught, and between the two of you, turn and turn about, one grinding while one bakes, shoulders burning, the peg handle worn glossy under 4 generations of palms. The stone literally does not cool for the span of the hard weeks. Bannocks, husk bread, oat cake on the bake stone, her mother's food, roundhouse food, the food of the people the letters call little, and it moves across your counter day after grey day, into the hands of soldiers' women, carters, the cobbler's boys, the shrine keeper, the families of the wretched Bretunculi, and the families of the garrison alike, at a price your father chalks and rechalks downward until it is barely north of cost. Silver survives empires, he mutters, Dubnus's line, throwing it back at the hills, but only if the neighbours do. That is not charity, he would want me to say. That is a man who has watched sieges from the inside, pricing the goodwill of a street for the years after the thaw. It is also charity. Both, maybe. Twice in the hard weeks the world sharpens to a point. The first point is an optio with a face like a fist, the same one from the September gate because garrisons are small worlds, who arrives at the tavern door in the 4th week with 2 soldiers and a requisition tablet, and announces, in the voice of a man reading rather than deciding, that private stocks of grain in the vicus are subject to purchase, his word purchase, at the listed rate, for the supply of the garrison. The listed rate is a number from October. The soldiers behind him look at their own boots. This is not a raid. It is worse. It is policy, apologizing as it reaches for your bins. Your father does not argue with the number. He does not argue at all. He limps, heavily, letting them see the limp for the first time in his life on purpose, to the wall, and takes down the alderwood box and unwraps the scarlet cloth, and lays the 2 bronze plates open on the counter in the firelight, wire, seals, and all. "Read it," he says. "Nothing else," the Optio reads. You watch his eyes, find the lines, the Emperor's names and titles, the cohorts listed, the grant. To the veterans who have served 25 years, citizenship, connubium, the standing of Romans. The bronze says, "This house is not the conquered." The bronze says, "This man's grain wears the toga." Requisition from citizens' private stores at a fist-faced Optio signature on a winter morning, with no decree behind him. That is a career-ending arithmetic, and every man in the room can do it. The Optio straightens, looks at your father, really looks the way the fort almost never looks down the hill. At the knee, the counter, the shelf, the sum of it. "9th Batavians," he says at last. "1st century, 25 years. Pause as long as the whole hard weeks. Then, we'll buy what you'll sell, veteran, at February's rate." Which is the entire negotiation, and both of them know it, and your father sells him 3 sacks he can barely spare at a price that is merely painful, because the point was never to sell nothing. The point was who chooses. The Optio even nods at the door, at your mother, at the quern going in the back room, which has not stopped this whole time, stone on stone, patient as weather. The roof over the roof. You never understood it as a child. You understand it now. Bronze in a box, doing in 1 silent minute what no lock, no fist, and no prayer on this street could have done. The second point is gentler and harder. In the 5th week, with the household grain at 6 days and the streets at less, there is a sound at first light that is not the trumpet, bells, small ones dull with cold, and down the white track from the northwest, out of the hills that Rome has no name list for, comes a line of dark shapes. Dubnus on foot, grey to the eyebrows with frost, leading ponies and driving before him 40 ewes. His own wintering stock, the flock a hill man does not sell because the flock is next year. He sells it. To the fort, mostly at the gate, mutton on the hoof for a garrison whose salt-meat stores are a week from echoing, and a dozen ewes down the street to be shared out and owed for. And he takes the fort's silver with a shut face, and in the tavern afterward, thawing hands around a pot of his sister's broth. He says only this, in British, when your mother finally asks him why. "Because you cannot eat next year if the neighbours do not live through this one." He looks up, catches you listening. "Shepherding," he says. "I told you, girl, you're not required to love the flock." But he had loved that flock. You saw his hands on the ewes at the gate. Some things do not fit in either of your languages, and you've stopped expecting them to. And then, on a Tuesday, because deliverance does not check the calendar for dignity, the wind goes round. You feel it before you hear it. The door draught dies mid-morning like a dog called off, and the smoke stands up straight in the smoke hole, and by noon there is water, actual moving water, ticking off the eaves in the sun. The thaw comes up the valley from the southwest with a smell you'd forgotten existed, the smell of soil, of things beginning, and the whole street stands in its doorway sniffing like hounds. 3 days the roads drink and soften and steam, and on the 4th day, from the east, where the Steingate runs toward Coria and the bridge and the depots of the whole world, comes the sound. Wheels. You are at the counter when it starts, and you do not leave the tavern. This you will remember with a strange pride all your life, that you heard the Empire come back up the road, and you kept the fire fed and the counter wiped, because the benches were full of people who needed somewhere to stand while they hoped. You witness it from your own doorway, at the edge of your own lamplight, which is where this whole story has stood all year. First the outriders, mud to the thigh, then the carts, oxen leaning into the yokes, wheels to the axle in the road's brown broth, drivers walking at the heads of their beasts easing them through, and sack upon sack upon sack under the lashed hides, wheat and barley by the hundreds of modia, the granary floors of the south arriving at the pace of the worst mile, cart after cart after cart up the long climb of the road and through the east gate, from mid-afternoon until well after the lamps were lit, and the vicus lining the way in the meltwater, not cheering exactly. Garrison people do not cheer grain, doing something quieter and older, counting. 31 carts. Cartus counted, of course, from the rain barrel, and was believed because his counting is the one incorruptible institution on this street. That evening your father takes down the amphora. No speech. He has thought about it. You can see he has thought about it. The day that is worth it has been 15 years arriving, and now that it is here it looks like this. A thawing street, a full granary, a tired family, neighbours upright, debts intact, everyone still breathing. He cuts the pitch seal with his knife, and the tavern goes quiet at the sound the way rooms go quiet for an oath. Proper Gallic wine, dark as bog water, breathing out a smell from a country none of you have seen. Sun, resin, somewhere else. He pours it into the good Samian cups and into every other cup in the house. A measure for everyone at the benches. A trectus first, then the carters who made it in from the road, then the neighbours, then a cup set on the counter for Dubnus, gone back to his hills, drunk by his sister in his name, and last, 2 fingers' width, ceremonially, appallingly for Catus, who receives it in his wobble-rimmed market cup like an emperor being crowned, and hates the taste with his whole soul, and finishes every drop, blinking, out of pure honour. Your father raises his cup to the room. He's not a speech-maker. He's a man who did 25 winters and opened 1 wine. He says, in Latin, to the roads, and then, in British, in your mother's language, in front of everyone the first time you have ever heard him toast in it, and to the hills. The benches answer in both tongues at once, and the sound they make together is not Latin, and is not British. It is Vindolanda. That is the climax of our year. Friends, I promised you no invented battle, and I am keeping the promise, because the frontier's real drama, the one the letters actually record, was never a horde on the skyline. It was this: moddy and axle grease, bronze in a box, a quern that would not stop, a hillman's flock, and 31 carts up a thawing road. The Britain of swords gets the films. The Britain of grain kept everyone alive. Now the wind has turned, the granaries are filling, the wine is open. Everything after this tonight is downhill, gently, all the way to sleep. March comes up the valley the way the convoy came, slowly, muddily, and better than anything that ever arrived clean. First the light returns, minute by minute, each day peeling a little more brown dusk off the afternoons, until one evening you realise you've wiped the counter by daylight, and you stand there with the cloth in your hand, absurdly moved by the ordinary sun. Then the sounds return, water everywhere, the burn full-throated, the eaves ticking, the ruts of the track running like small businesses. Then the curlews come back to the moor, spilling their long, bubbling call down the wind, and your mother stops in the yard with her head lifted, listening the way other people pray. In her people's reckoning, that call is the year's hinge. The cold may argue on for weeks. It has lost, and everything on the hillside knows it. The vicus comes out of winter like a household airing after illness. Doors stand open, bedding steams on lines. The cobbler sits in his actual doorway again, working in daylight, tapping his little bronze tacks in a rhythm you've not heard since October. The whole street throws itself into the oldest ritual of the North, the counting of what remains, so much seed grain, so much silver, so many hens. One neighbour gone, the old widow at the street's end, who went to sleep warm in the coldest week with her daughter's family around her, which on this frontier, in that winter, is what a merciful death looks like. The street buried her when the ground gave permission, with Roman coins on her eyes and British rowan in her hands. Both. Because how else would this street bury anyone? And the fort exhales. You can hear the difference in the trumpet before you can see it in anything. The calls come brisker. The drill ground curses recover their old creativity. The wall watch stops being a survival exercise and goes back to being boredom, which is what soldiers are for. The gates open earlier. The sick list, the water queue has it on good authority, shrinks by the week. The eye cases going back to duty squinting into the strengthening light. Senecio comes down the track on the first properly warm off-duty day, and he is himself with the colour back on, and he buys the heel-end loaf, and he says, and the whole tavern, which has been waiting all winter, holds its breath. Warm today. And for the first time in recorded history, it is. The benches detonate. Atrectus pounds the counter with the flat of his hand. Your father laughs the big laugh, the one from before the knee. Senecio looks around at the wreckage he has caused with 2 words, deeply alarmed, and then, slowly, the way spring comes, grins. You will remember that grin longer than you remember the whole month. He sits at the end bench with his bread, and you find reasons to wipe the near tables, and the conversation you have is made of nothing. The state of the road, the price of nails, whether the curlews came early. And it is somehow also the longest conversation of your life. At the door, leaving, he pauses with his hand on the frame and says, not looking at you, in the tone of a man reporting to the room, the comb. Does the house use it? The house uses it, you say. He nods once at the doorframe, as if the doorframe had asked, and he walks up the 140 steps like a man who has completed a dangerous patrol, and your mother's needle by the fire does not pause and does not need to. April is work, and I will not pretend otherwise, because spring on a frontier is not a rest. It is the bill for surviving winter, presented in labour. The oven's throat wants relining after its hardest season. You and your father rebuild the clay lining over 3 days, and he teaches you the mix as his old cohort's ovens taught him. Clay, sand, a fist of horsehair, patience. And you fire it slow, and the first batch out of the renewed oven is so exactly right that your mother, tearing a heel to test the crumb, says nothing at all, which is her highest grade. The garden plots are dug and dunged, the hens go broody. Atrectus brews his first spring beer with the last of the myrtle, and stands godfather proud over the barrels, while the whole street finds an errand past his door for the smell of it. And Catus, this spring, discovers letters. It begins as theft, as everything with Catus begins. He gets into the wrapped cloth under your sleeping place. Hunting, he will later claim under interrogation, for the comb, purely for scientific reasons, and finds the practice tablet and the ghost letters in the grain and your charcoal rows of X and V. and instead of denying the crime, he appears at your elbow at the counter, board in both hands, and demands, in the voice he uses for cavalry matters, "Which one is my name?" So you teach him, evenings by the hearth, on the shaved board and the hearthstones. C, a rim of a cup. A, the house with no floor, exactly as Privatus taught it to you. T. His letters are terrible, sword slashes, each one dug into the wax of the charcoal like an assault, and he learns them at a speed that quietly frightens you, because you were 14 and grateful. He is 9 and entitled, and there is a lesson about the generations of the frontier in that difference if you want it. Privatus hears of it. Privatus hears of everything, and sends down with a week's order a genuinely spoiled tablet leaf, split past mending for the recruit's practice, and your mother watches her son and her daughter bent over Latin letters by British firelight, and what she thinks she does not say in either language. On the 1st of May, your father pays the debt. He does it properly, ceremonially, the way he opened the wine. He unpicks the hoard from its hiding. 110 denarii, the winter's whole discipline, intact to the coin. And he puts on his good cloak, and he takes you with him, because someone must witness the tally, and your eyes are the family's eyes, for written numbers now. You ride the borrowed pony cart down the Staingate East, your first time past the 3rd milestone in your entire life. Mark that. 19 years old, and the world's edge for you has always been a bread oven, and now it is suddenly a road unrolling. To Coria in its valley by the bridge, a real town, forge smoke and warehouses and a market with 4 kinds of accent, where the lender operates from a room behind a saddler's shop, all scales and strong box and a clerk with a face like a sum. This silver is weighed. The tally sticks are matched. Your father's notched half against the lender's, the old way, wood against wood. And the clerk writes the release, and you read it, slowly, moving your lips, cart uphill, before your father sets his mark to it. Paid in full, the day and the consul's names, the sums. It is the first document of your life that you've read on your family's behalf, out loud, with money on the table, and when you look up and nod, it says what it should say. Your father looks at you for a moment the way he looked at the bronze in the box. "Roof over the roof," he says, and folds the release into his pouch. And that is the debt gone. A year of arithmetic, ended in one afternoon by a girl reading. Going home, he lets you drive. The evening comes down green and gold over the long backs of the hills. The pony leans into the westering light, and your father, 2 pots of Coria's beer aboard and free of 110 denarii, sings. Quietly, badly, in the Batavian river dialect of his boyhood, some rowing song with a stroke still in it. You cannot understand one word. You will remember every note. That is what the spring of the year 102 is on this hillside. The bill paid, the oven relined, the letters learned, the grin grinned, the release read aloud. The letters up at the fort record springs exactly like it. Requests for leave suddenly hopeful, orders for road repairs, the whole correspondence turning its face to the sun. Nothing happened, a historian would say. Everything happened. Ask anyone who has ever come out of a hard winter hole. And then it is June, and the year gives you its gift. It arrives, like everything on this frontier, as freight and gossip in that order. First the gossip by the usual river. Kitchen, servants, water queue. The Lady Severa is coming to Vindolanda, coming here. The friend from Briga, the birthday lady, the my dearest soul of last September, returning the visit at midsummer with her maid and an escort to stay under Lepidina's roof. And before you decide this is my invention, a visit conjured to warm my ending. Hold, among the real letters of this real house, in Claudia Severa's real correspondence dug from this ground, there survives exactly this. Her writing to Lepidina about coming to see her, telling her sister that she will ask her Brockus for leave to make the journey, that there are things she longs to discuss. The visits ran both directions between those two houses. The road between Brigga and Vindolanda knew both women's escorts. Whether her wheels rolled in the June of our particular year, no one can say, and I have told you so. That she asked, that she longed, that she came. That is ink. Tonight we set her arrival in midsummer, because you have earned a candlelit evening, and so, gods know, had they. The Praetorium order comes down 2 days ahead, and it is September's order reborn. Fine loaves, doubled. Honey cakes, and Privatus's message, relayed solemnly by the kitchen boy, specifies your mother's honey cakes. The ones from the birthday, the lady remembered them. Your mother receives this intelligence at the loom with a face of perfect indifference, and then bakes, over the following 2 days, the finest batch of anything ever produced on this street, testing and rejecting 2 full rounds that any praetorium in the empire would have paraded. Indifference. Of course. The visit itself, the vicus sees the way the vicus sees everything grand. In pieces through a doorway, at the edge of its own lamplight. A party on the West Road at mid-afternoon. Outriders, a covered carriage swaying on the ruts. Pack ponies, climbing the track with the low sun behind them, so that the whole procession comes up the hill trailing gold dust. Word running down the street faster than the horses, Catus on the rain barrel counting riders, and at the fort gate, small with distance but unmistakable, a figure in a pale travelling cloak handed down from the carriage, and a figure in madder red coming out under the gate arch to meet her. Not waiting in the courtyard as rank would allow, but out under the arch, onto the road itself. And the 2 of them folding together into one shape for a long moment, while the escort sat their horses and looked with great professionalism at the middle distance. Sister. You are close enough in the bread and rumour sense, and far enough in every other sense, and that is our whole station in this story, and it has been enough all year. You see the shape the 2 women make, and you understand, with your whole chest, that the letter you have never read said exactly what it said. That evening you carry the second delivery up yourself, the honey cakes, wanted fresh for the lamp's hour, and so it is that you're standing in the kitchen passage of the Praetorium at dusk, on the warm breathing floor, when the sound comes down the corridor. Women laughing, not the counter laugh, not the bench roar you have poured beer into all your life, something else entirely, 2 voices that know each other to the bone, overlapping, dropping to murmurs, snagging on some remembered thing and going up again like birds off water. Lamplight stands in the corridor the way lamplight stood, last September, in a hall you only heard about, all down the hall like a ship, except now you're inside the hull of it, holding a basket of your mother's cakes, and the laughter is real and present and 6 paces away behind a curtain, and the smell is beeswax and warm honey and some southern scent, and under your feet Rome's hidden fire keeps the stone as warm as skin. Privatus takes the basket. He's moving at the pace that is technically not running, but his face tonight is the face of a steward whose house is doing the thing houses are for. He lifts the cloth, counts without counting, And then, a thing he has never once done in 5 years. He takes one honey cake from the top, sets it on a Samian dish, and puts the dish in your hands. From the lady's table, he says, for the baker, her words. And then, because the passage is busy and the moment is against regulations, he adds, quick and quiet, in the voice he taught you letters in. She asked whose bread it was. She was told, go on home, girl. You walk down the 140 steps in the blue midsummer dusk. It never gets fully dark this time of year, this far north. The sky holds a green-gold seam in the northwest all night, as if the day were waiting just under the hill, carrying a Samian dish with one honey cake on it, and you are 19, and the fort stands black and quiet on your right hand, and the vicus glimmers low and gold on your left, and exactly halfway down, where the track levels, you stop. Up in the praetorium, one window, a real window glazed, the only glass on this hillside, shows amber. Behind it, 2 women who crossed a frozen province for each other's birthdays are talking by lamplight, and will talk half the night, about their husbands and their children and their households and their winters, in the fine, quick Latin of their letters, on the last lit ledge of the entire Roman world. Below in the tavern, your father is chalking the evening's tallies, and your mother is at her needle, and a trectus is holding forth, and the benches are answering in the mongrel 2-tongued speech of the street that raised you. And standing between them, on the worn stone track, holding a cake on a dish like an offering going the wrong direction, down the hill, from the great to the small, you feel the year close its circle around you, quietly, like a hand. You are both. You are neither. You're the girl on the track between the lamp and the hearth, and the bread going up and the cake coming down, and for one long breath in the June half-dark that is not a seam running through you. It is a road, and you're the one who walks it, and both ends are warm. At home, the cake is divided with the gravity of a treaty. 4 ways, and a corner saved for Dubness's autumn visit, wrapped in cloth on the shelf beside the good cups, where things wait that have somewhere to go. Catus eats his share in 2 bites, and then copies, laboriously, onto the hearthstone in charcoal, at your dictation, his longest text to date, 3 words, from the lady. Your mother watches the letters form, and then she does the thing you will think about for the rest of your life. She takes the charcoal from her son, and beneath his 3 Latin words she adds, unhesitating, in letters you never once suspected her of owning, a 4th word, her own name, Enica, neat, practised, secret. Privatus is not the only one who was ever taught, she says in British to the fire, and will say no more about it that night or ever. High summer folds over the frontier. The cohort sweats through exercises. The road gangs sing. The hunting parties go out. The prefect and his friends run to hounds across these moors all season. And among the fort's real letters is one officer writing to another, "If you love me, brother, send me hunting nets," which I mention purely so you know that even the elegant Latin of the praetorium came down in the end to a man wanting his mate to lend him kit. The hay comes in off the meadows by the burn. The bilberries ripen on the moor, and Catus dyes himself to the elbows gathering them, and your mother sets the fir sloes to steep. Senecio makes his slow, ceremonious visits, and on the feast of the cohort standards he sits at the end bench wearing his decorations, such as an auxiliary owns, and lets Catus hold his dagger under supervision so strict it is practically a religious rite. And the summer, in the way of the best summers, does the kindest thing a stretch of time can do. It passes slowly and contains nothing worth reporting, and everyone in it is alive. And so we come down to the last days of August, in the year 102, with the year's circle nearly joined, and the light beginning just perceptibly to lean. You feel it in the mornings first. You, of all people on this hillside, would. The oven dark before the trumpet has a new edge to it, thin as a knife's spine, the first cool breath of the turning. The hills go tawny. The rowans redden along the burn. At the water tank the talk is of harvest and of winter wood and, already, inevitably, deliciously, of the 11th of September, because the Praetorium kitchen has begun its murmuring, and the murmurs say there will be travelling again this year, the lady to her lady, the road to Briga, the birthday kept. The steward will come down the hill himself some morning soon, and order the fine loaves, and the whole wheel will turn through your hands again. The white flour, your mother's stone, the oven's dragon breath, the escort forming up bright and jingling in the cold sun. The bread still has to rise. Next month, next year. It is the first rule of your life, and it has become, do you notice, a comfort. Things that must be done daily cannot be lost. They can only be done again. One evening in that last week of August, you climb to the top of the track alone, in the long amber light, and stand where you stood at midsummer with the dish in your hands, and look at all of it. The fort black gold on its platform, smoke rising from 100 fires straight into the still air, the vicus below, your own roof among the roofs, one window glowing where your mother has lit the lamp, the Staingate running east and west into its two horizons, the moors going north, fold on fold into the blue. Somewhere under your feet, in the trodden dark of the demolished floors, the fort's old rubbish lies sealed and sleeping, the shoes, the bones, the combs, the thin wooden leaves with their ink. Above, the first star. In the fort the trumpet sounds the first watch of the night, the same call that opened your year with your hands in the ashes, and from the wall a voice answers, and the frontier settles onto its elbows for another night of watching the dark, which is all it has ever really done. Here is the one thing I will tell you that no one on that hillside can know, and then I am done with telling. You do not yet know, none of you, not the sentry, not the prefect, not your father with his bronze, not your mother with her stone, that in 20 years an emperor will come to this frontier in person, and look at this same country from some such rise in the land, and order a wall of cut stone coast to coast, 80 miles, 3 years' labour for 3 legions, running along the ridge just north of your track, so close that its shadow will fall on the roads you bake for. The fort will be rebuilt in stone. The little Britons and the men from the rivers will go on trading and marrying and burying under it for 300 years. And when it all finally ends, the pay, the convoys, the trumpet, the wall will stand on, emptying slowly, and sheep will graze it, and it will carry the emperor's name down 20 centuries, Hadrian. Your hillside will be a quiet green shoulder of it, but that is tomorrow's tomorrow, and it belongs to other sleepers. Tonight the frontier is turf and timber, and the year is closing soft, and no one has ever heard of a stone wall and the lamps are being lit. Come down the track now, slowly. There is no hurry left anywhere in this story. The tavern at the day's end, the benches emptying, the fire settling into its deep orange conversation with itself. Your father bolts the door and counts the takings, chalk whispering, and drops the coins into the box with a sound that means enough, not wealth, Enough! Your mother banks her needle into the wool and stretches her fingers, and the loom stands in the corner with tomorrow's cloth waiting patient in it. Catus is asleep already, belt and sheath on the peg now. He has learned that much. One charcoal-smudged hand open on the blanket, letters in it all the way to his dreams. Under your own sleeping place, wrapped in cloth. A shaved wooden tablet with ghost letters in the grain, and a boxwood comb with one red thread at its spine. The things that are yours, small things, real enough. You lie down in the dark and the house talks itself to sleep around you, beam by beam, the way timber houses do. The fire ticks. The wind tries the shutter seam once out of habit and gives up. Over the wall, faint, the sentry's call goes along the rampart and is answered. Post to post, little candles of sound in the great dark, and you think, as sleep comes up around you like warm water, they are watching so I need not. Somebody's son from a river far away is standing in the wind in good grey socks so that this whole hillside can close its eyes. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have bread for the morning and silver in the box, and both your languages and everyone under this roof is breathing. That is more than most of the world gets, in any century you care to name. That is enough. Let the fort keep its watch. Let the granaries hold their grain in the dark, sack on tallied sack. Let the road rest empty under the stars from Coria to the western sea. Let the two ladies sleep well in their warm-floored houses, and their letters lie quiet in the baskets, ink drying toward forever. Let your father's knee ache less. Let your mother's stone stand still until morning. Let the year turn. It knows the way. Centuries will pass. The fort you know will change beyond recognition. The timber will become stone, and the stone will become ruin, and the ruin will become a green field with sheep on it, so quiet that larks will nest in the granaries. The trumpet will be replaced by 17 centuries of wind. The road will sink into the grass and lie there like a memory, and shepherds will pave their folds with the flagstones of the headquarters and never once wonder. And then, in the year 1973, on a wet March day so close to your own calendar of thaw, people will come with trowels and endless patience, and they will go down through the layers, floor under floor, into the sealed black wet where no air ever reached. And there in the dark you walked on all your life they will find it. The shoes, thousands of shoes, your street remembered by its feet, exactly as I told you. The combs, the hairpins, and then thin slivers of wood, stuck together like dead leaves, and someone will pry two apart and see faint marks and hold them to the light. Writing, ink, voices. My fellow soldiers have no beer. Please order some to be sent. I have sent you socks, 2 pairs of sandals and 2 pairs of underpants. The wretched little Britons. The roads are awful. I did not care to injure the animals. 15 sick, 6 wounded, 10 with inflammation of the eyes, 20 apples if nice ones are available. And on one leaf in 2 hands, a scribe's, and then, taking the pen herself, a woman's, the oldest surviving Latin any woman's hand has left us. A birthday invitation, closing across 1900 years as if across a garden fence. I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to prosper and hail. They will number them, and translate them, and set them under glass in a museum in London. And scholars will call them the Vindolanda tablets, and mean by that a treasure beyond price. But you know better now, don't you? You have lived down the hill from them for a year. They are shopping lists, and complaints about beer, and worried mothers, and sock deliveries, and 2 friends who loved each other across 12 cold miles of moor. That is the treasure. that the past, when it finally speaks in its own voice, sounds exactly like us. People will still bake before dawn, still knit socks against the winter and send them with worry folded inside, still count carts and pay debts and teach children letters by firelight, still cross bad roads for a friend's birthday, still stand a moment in the doorway last thing, looking at the lamps. Some things do not change. The bread and the letters do not change. The love that sends socks does not change. And Senovara, the girl whose hands you have worn all this year, she was never in the letters, and I told you so at the start. The composite eyes I lent you close here, and whatever real girl stood at her counter, and they stood there, be sure of it, two-tongued and quick, generation after generation. History closed over them gently, like the water meadow over the road. Their flower is in the layers, their footprints are in the museum. Their names belong to the dark, and the dark at Vindolanda has turned out to be the safest keeping there is. So let it come now. Let sleep take you the way the thaw took the frozen road. Slowly, from the south, with a smell of things beginning. Let the trumpet fade. Let the quernstone still. Let the oven cool, tick by tick, holding its warmth the way stone holds it, long into the dark. Let the letters lie in their wet black safekeeping, waiting out the centuries under the floors, patient as your mother's people, certain as ink. You have carried the basket up the hill and down, you have turned the stone and read the release and counted the carts and kept the fire. You've earned this rest. Take all of it. The watch is set. The granaries are full. The lamps are lit all down the hall. And dream, if you can, of a thin leaf of wood travelling a frontier road in a courier's satchel, through the wind and the heather, from one warm doorway to another, carrying 8 words that outlasted the empire that carried them. I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, my dearest soul. Good night.